A single moment changed everything we thought we knew about one of music's greatest mysteries. It happened on an ordinary Sunday morning in a small Arkansas church, when technology captured something never meant for public ears. Bob Joyce's wife, unaware that a live microphone was recording every word, leaned close to her husband and spoke a name that sent shockwaves through millions of Elvis Presley fans worldwide. Without hesitation, without any hint of joking, she called him Elvis. The revelation spread like wildfire across social media platforms within hours. TikTok exploded with reaction videos, Reddit forums buzzed with analysis, and YouTube channels dissected every syllable of the recording. This wasn't some elaborate hoax or publicity stunt crafted by conspiracy theorists in internet forums. This was an intimate, unguarded moment between a husband and wife, captured accidentally by church sound equipment that neither realized was still transmitting. What makes this slip so devastating isn't just the words themselves, but the casual way they were spoken. There was no dramatic pause, no theatrical delivery, no sense that anything extraordinary had just happened. She said it the way you might remind someone to pick up milk from the store or ask them to turn off the lights. The naturalness of it struck listeners as more convincing than any staged revelation ever could. This was the voice of familiarity, of someone who had called this man by that name countless times before. The silence that followed her words carries equal weight. No quick correction, no embarrassed laughter, no attempt to clarify what she meant. Bob Joyce himself said nothing to contradict or explain away the slip. That pause, stretching just long enough to feel uncomfortable, seemed to confirm what millions of fans have suspected for decades. In churches across America, congregations have listened to this soft-spoken pastor sing gospel hymns and wondered if they were witnessing the greatest disappearing act in entertainment history. For over 40 years, devoted Elvis fans have refused to accept that their idol died in August 1977. They've pointed to inconsistencies in official reports, analyzed blurry photographs of supposed sightings, and built elaborate theories about why the king of rock and roll might have chosen to vanish from public life. But until this moment, captured purely by accident, they had nothing approaching proof. The hot mic incident represents a crack in what many believe is a carefully maintained facade, offering the first glimpse behind decades of secrecy. This private moment between husband and wife forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about death, identity, and the price of fame. Could the man millions mourned actually be living quietly among us, hidden in plain sight behind a pastor's collar in a humble church in Arkansas? The Household of Faith Church in Benton, Arkansas, sits modestly among residential streets, its brick facade giving no hint of the earth-shattering moment that would unfold within its walls. That Sunday morning began like countless others, with early sunlight filtering through stained glass windows as congregants filled wooden pews. Pastor Bob Joyce moved through his pre-service routine, checking his notes, adjusting his tie, and preparing to deliver another message of hope and faith to his devoted followers. Behind the sanctuary, in the quiet space where ministers gathered their thoughts before facing their flock, the church's sound system hummed with its usual electronic vigilance. Wireless microphones, designed to capture every word of the service for those in distant pews, and recording equipment, remained active even in these private moments. Technology that had become so commonplace, so invisible, that its presence was forgotten by everyone who mattered. Bob Joyce's wife approached her husband in that sacred space, her footsteps barely audible against the carpeted floor. She carried herself with the quiet dignity expected of a pastor's spouse, someone accustomed to living partially in the public eye while maintaining the private intimacy of marriage. In her mind, this was a moment shared between two people who had built a life together away from scrutiny, away from questions, away from a world that might not understand their truth. The words came naturally, the way they probably had thousands of times before in the privacy of their home. "Elvis," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of familiarity, the casual affection of someone addressing their closest companion. No drama accompanied the utterance, no sense that she was revealing anything extraordinary. To her, this was simply a wife speaking to her husband, using whatever name felt most natural in that unguarded instant. But the microphone captured everything. Every nuance of her voice, every subtle inflection that spoke of long intimacy with the man she addressed. The recording equipment, indifferent to the magnitude of what it was preserving, continued its electronic duty of documentation. Within the church's sound system, those words traveled through circuits and amplifiers, creating a digital record that would soon escape the confines of that quiet Arkansas sanctuary. The immediate aftermath reveals as much as the words themselves. No sharp intake of breath from Bob Joyce, no hurried correction or nervous laughter. The natural flow of their interaction continued as if nothing remarkable had occurred, as if calling him by that name was as ordinary as commenting on the weather. This absence of surprise, this lack of any visible reaction, speaks to a reality that transcends the accidental nature of the recording itself. Pastor Bob Joyce emerged from relative obscurity in the early 1980s, arriving in Arkansas like a man seeking refuge from a storm only he could see. His background before that time remains remarkably sparse, lacking the usual documentation that follows most people through their lives. No childhood friends stepping forward with memories, no school photographs surfacing in yearbooks, no clear trail of addresses or employment records. For someone who would eventually capture the attention of millions, his early history reads like pages torn from a book. When congregants first heard him sing, the effect was immediate and unsettling. His voice carried a weight that transcended typical pastoral delivery, resonating with the same emotional depth and technical mastery that had once filled stadiums and recording studios. The vibrato patterns, the way he bent notes at their peaks, the subtle growl that emerged during passionate moments all echoed something hauntingly familiar. These weren't learned techniques or studied imitations, but the natural expression of vocal cords shaped by decades of use. The physical resemblance strikes observers like a photograph come to life. The same piercing blue eyes that had captivated audiences worldwide, the distinctive jawline that had launched 1,000 imitators, the way he moved his hands when speaking all mirror the mannerisms of the king himself. But most unsettling is the scar above his right eyebrow, positioned exactly where Elvis Presley bore an identical mark from a childhood accident. Medical experts have calculated the astronomical odds of two unrelated men sharing such specific facial characteristics, including an identical scar in an identical location. Yet Bob Joyce's public persona could not be more different from the flamboyant performer who once gyrated across stages in sequin jumpsuits. This man speaks in measured tones about faith and redemption, dresses in simple dark suits, and carries himself with the humble authority of someone who has found peace through surrender. His sermons focus on themes of forgiveness, second chances, and the possibility of transformation, messages that resonate with particular poignancy for someone who might have experienced the ultimate transformation himself. The congregation that gathers weekly to hear him speaks in hushed, protective tones when outsiders ask questions. They've watched reporters arrive seeking answers and leave frustrated by polite deflections and claims of ignorance. This isn't the typical behavior of a church community proud of their pastor's growing fame, but rather the coordinated silence of people guarding something precious and fragile. Their loyalty extends beyond normal pastoral boundaries, suggesting a shared knowledge that transcends simple religious devotion. Gospel music flows from Bob Joyce's lips with the passion of someone who has found his true calling, not the obligation of someone fulfilling professional duties. When he sings "How Great Thou Art" or "He Touched Me," the delivery carries an authenticity that suggests these songs represent more than repertoire, but rather the soundtrack to a spiritual journey that led him far from stages and screaming fans to this quiet sanctuary where peace finally became possible. Professional voice analysts who have studied the recordings describe something that defies conventional explanation. When comparing Bob Joyce's performances of gospel classics with Elvis Presley's renditions from the 1970s, the similarities extend far beyond surface resemblance into the realm of forensic identification. The specific way both voices handle melismatic runs, the identical placement of breath breaks, and the precise vibrato frequency all suggest not imitation but continuation. These are the kinds of vocal fingerprints that develop over decades of use, impossible to replicate through study or practice alone. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a forensic phonetics expert who analyzed the recordings, noted anomalies that troubled her professional certainty. The muscle memory embedded in vocal performance, she explained, creates patterns as unique as fingerprints. When someone attempts to imitate another voice, microscopic variations always emerge under detailed analysis. Yet the comparative studies of Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley revealed consistency patterns that challenged her understanding of what imitation could achieve. The reactions from Elvis Presley's inner circle have been equally revealing in their careful ambiguity. Priscilla Presley, when confronted with direct questions about the Bob Joyce theory, has never offered the definitive denial that would seem natural if the claims were baseless. Instead, she deflects with comments about what people choose to believe, maintaining a diplomatic distance that preserves multiple possibilities. For someone who shared intimate years with Elvis, who knew his voice as well as anyone alive, such equivocation carries profound implications. Lisa Marie Presley's responses before her tragic death in 2023 added another layer of mystery to an already complex situation. In interviews, she occasionally spoke of her father in ways that blurred temporal boundaries, making references that seemed to suggest ongoing rather than concluded relationships. Friends described her as carrying a burden of knowledge that went beyond typical grief, a weight that seemed to involve protecting something rather than simply mourning someone. The FBI files declassified in recent years reveal that Elvis Presley was indeed under surveillance during his final years, facing credible threats that extended beyond obsessed fans into the realm of organized crime and dangerous individuals who saw him as a target. These documents, previously classified for national security reasons, paint a picture of a man whose fame had become a genuine liability, whose every public appearance required extensive security coordination. The psychological pressure of living under such constant threat, combined with the suffocating demands of his career, created conditions where disappearance might have seemed not just attractive but necessary for survival. For someone whose early love was always gospel music, whose spiritual foundations ran deeper than his rock and roll persona, the idea of retreating into pastoral ministry carries a certain poetic logic. The man who once sang "He touched me" with tears streaming down his face might have found his truest calling not in entertaining crowds but in shepherding souls, trading the spotlight for something more meaningful and infinitely more peaceful. The price of such an elaborate deception, if true, extends far beyond the logistics of creating a new identity. It demands the ultimate sacrifice, watching the world mourn your death while you live in silence, observing your loved ones grieve while you remain unable to offer comfort, and witnessing your legacy become mythology while you fade into anonymity. The man who once commanded global attention would have traded that power for something infinitely more precious: the freedom to exist without fear, to worship without spectacle, to love without scrutiny. If Bob Joyce truly is Elvis Presley, then his greatest performance wasn't on any stage but in the decades of quiet ministry that followed his supposed death. Every sermon delivered, every hymn sung, every moment of pastoral care offered to his congregation would represent not deception but transformation. The raw vulnerability required to fake one's death and rebuild an entire existence speaks to a desperation that transcends simple desire for privacy and enters the realm of survival. The hot mic incident that started this investigation takes on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. Was it truly an accident, or was it the subconscious slip of someone tired of carrying such a monumental secret? After decades of careful silence, did the weight of hidden identity finally crack the facade in a moment of unguarded intimacy? The casual way his wife spoke that name suggests it wasn't a slip at all, but rather a glimpse of their private reality, accidentally shared with a world that has wondered and waited for over 40 years. The congregation at Household of Faith Church continues to gather each Sunday, many now aware that their services might harbor one of the greatest mysteries in entertainment history. They listen to their pastor's words about redemption and second chances with new ears, hearing possible autobiography in what they once considered simple theology. The man before them, whether Bob Joyce or Elvis Presley, has found something that eluded him in his previous life: genuine peace. The truth, whatever it may be, remains locked behind the quiet dignity of a small Arkansas church and the protective silence of those who have chosen loyalty over revelation. The hot mic moment that ignited worldwide speculation has settled into memory, but its implications continue to ripple through the consciousness of everyone who heard those casual, devastating words. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story isn't whether Bob Joyce is Elvis Presley, but what it reveals about our collective need for mystery, for hope, and for the possibility that even the most public figures can find ways to reclaim their private humanity. The question remains unanswered, suspended between faith and skepticism, waiting for a resolution that may never come or may already be singing gospel hymns every Sunday morning in a modest sanctuary where secrets and salvation quietly coexist.